Hi, I'm Whitney Espick, the CEO of the MIT Alumni Association, and I hope you enjoy this digital production created for alumni and friends like you.
So now for the time we've been waiting for, I've been anxiously awaiting this session. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Tamika Mallory, our closing keynote speaker, to speak with us this afternoon. She's a mother, esteemed social justice leader, advocate, and activist. Tamika is co-president and co-founder of the Women's March. She's been recognized as an outspoken champion for social justice since her teenage years. Tamika worked closely with the Obama administration for years as an advocate for civil rights issues, equal rights for women, healthcare, gun violence, and police misconduct. She's a leading figure in the grassroots, community-based effort to stop gun violence in New York City, and was instrumental in creating the New York City Crisis Management System, an official gun violence prevention program that awards nearly $20 million annually to innovative violence intervention organizations. After serving as National Action Network's youngest executive director, she founded Mallory Consulting, a strategic planning firm in New York City. Moderating our conversation with Tamika today is Catherine D'Ignazio. She received her master's in the Media Lab here, and she's now the assistant professor of civic media and data visualization storytelling in the journalism department at Emerson College. A scholar, artist, designer, and software developer, she focuses on data literacy and visualization for civic engagement and community empowerment. Catherine is currently a principal investigator at Emerson Engagement Lab, a research affiliate at the MIT Center for Civic Media and the MIT Media Lab, and an organizer with a public laboratory for technology and science. So let's welcome both Tamika and Catherine.
Wow. Just gonna try to control my inner fangirl right now. Hopefully I will appear composed throughout this conversation. So, Tamika, it's a huge honor to be sharing the stage with you. I would like us to just give a hand for one of the co-organizers of the largest protest in US history. Just like, that is a thing.
It is a thing. It's a lot of work. Pain and love.
Yeah. So Tamika, my first question for you is, as Hiana was saying, you've been an organizer and a leader for a really long time, longer than prior to the Women's March. You know, it's kind of a culmination moment, I'm sure, but you've been a leader for a long time. And well, for some folks, actually, how many people attended the Women's March? Yeah, all right. So for some folks, right, like this was an amazing moment. And for some folks, a lot of the young people that I teach at Emerson College, this was a true and real political awakening. And then for other folks, people are like, well, we've been here for a long time. Like, we've been fighting the good fight for a long time. So my first question is, what's different about this post-Trump moment? What's the same? Like, what struggles are sort of ongoing and they've always been there, and what has changed?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me to be here today and for MIT inviting me. I would say that the second part of the question is most important. It's like, what is the same? And most things are the same. I mean, we see that you know, a lot of people feel like they've just been introduced to oppression. Like, where did this come from? And a lot of people have just really kind of been comfortable with things as it was because it didn't necessarily impact them. But there are communities that have been in trouble for a very, very long time. And I like to tell people all the time that Donald Trump is not the beginning of oppression. There have been isms that have existed way before him. And, oh, sorry, I'm breaking up the stuff already. I just got here. Don't charge me for the mic. And so these sort of isms have been in existence for forever, and we know that people dealing with things like poverty and police brutality and lack of education and all these things, it existed, and people just weren't paying attention to it. And I think we're in a moment where folks have to say, you know what, I wasn't. I just didn't, it didn't really matter. You know, what concerns most people is like what's happening from the time they wake up in the morning until they go to bed, their community, their street, their block, their home. But they're not necessarily looking at what's happening in communities that are really impacted by a multitude of issues. And so I think what makes this moment different is that we have this president, this sort of, well, you invited me, so I'm gonna be very honest about, but you kind of have this crazy man in chief that is so bold about his views and opinions that everybody is able to see it. And I think what makes Donald Trump different from any other person is that he is in a position of power to be able to create mass destruction. And that's very, very serious and significant. He has at his fingertips the ability to influence policy, to influence people, places, and things. And that is a real threat. It's a real threat. So, with that being said, but I think what also is important is in the Women's March, there are people who have this idea that we marched against Trump. And while it did start that way, because Teresa Shook, one woman in her home, she said, I want 40 friends to go march with me. And they got together on Facebook, and the next thing you know, there was 10,000, and then 20,000, and 100,000 people. And sort of her concept was, let's go march because Trump became president and it's scary, and what are we gonna do? But the reality is that when we got involved as seasoned organizers, we said, if we march against one man, if we march against one person, if we start sort of fighting with this one person, we lose the battle. We lose the war, basically. We lose it because too many times do we sort of get caught up in this idea of fighting one person instead of really looking at the societal issues that if we all are at the table at the same time, perhaps we can actually do something about these things, and it can be long-lasting beyond any person that takes office and becomes president or any other position, even school board elections. You want to set rules that and make sure that our moral standing is in place in a way that people don't feel that they can just do whatever they want to do no matter, what, no matter who's in office. So that's kind of the way we looked at it. We came in and we said, Donald Trump is cool, if that's how you feel, good, but that's not our focus. Our focus has to be bigger than that.
That's great. I mean, so on that note, can you tell us, oh yeah, let's give it up. So on that note, can you tell us a little bit about what led to the organization of the march, and did you feel like it accomplished what you wanted it to do? Actually, I'll ask like 3 questions, and sort of like, where do you see the march now? Like, where has that energy? Where is that going now, and how do people join it?
So you know that first of all, as I said, Teresa Shook, one woman. Then there was this thing called Black Twitter. Mm-hmm. And if you ever know anything about it, it's the worst place to get caught up because they tear you up on Black Twitter. And so because the march was improperly named, in the beginning it was called Million Women March. And that is a march that is very, very historical for women of color, for Black women particularly. It happened 20 years ago. And so when Teresa Shook named it that, it created a Twitter storm of people who were very, very upset about that. And when I got involved, they were like, what are we gonna do? Like, we have a big problem here in terms of people feeling like there was this, what do I want to call it? Like, there was this co-opting, if you will, sort of stealing of history, and people were really upset about it. And so they said, we want to name it the Women's March on Washington. And I went and asked Dr. King's daughter how she felt about it. I wanted to get the advice of someone who I thought would be able to guide us, not just from her father's perspective, because her father, Dr. King, was involved in the March on Washington, which we know is very historic, and there were people who were concerned about that name as well. But she is a minister, wanted just some guidance from her. And she sat back and said, and she got on a call with all the state organizers across the country and said, it's not about the name. It's more so about what you do with the legacy of the March on Washington that's gonna matter after the march. And so we began to organize from that place. We took that name on, we started to look at it, and then of course, the idea of feminism and what it means, and when it comes up in certain communities, it can be a trigger, a very negative trigger. We're finding out that a lot of things are negative triggers for particular communities as we do this work. And feminism for Black women and women of color is a trigger. The trigger is set off by the idea that feminism has not represented us properly. It has meant that we fight in the struggle, but then white women are able to get their rights for whatever we're fighting for, and they don't necessarily stay in the fight until women of color are also freed from whatever bondage we're dealing with. And so that was a big challenge, being able to get women of color, again, particularly Black women, to say, I will come, I will be a part of this. And so I worked day and night, tears, cursing, yelling, screaming, hollering in my little space by myself, really begging people to understand the opportunity that we had, that we should not let the history books record that there was this big moment in history that women really stood up and stood together, and yet women of color were not in position. Our issues were not at the table. And so we were able to finally get people to get wrapped around it, and Angela Davis and Janelle Monáe and the mothers of many of the fallen loved ones, whether it be Trayvon Martin's mother, Sabrina Fulton, and I mean, you just name the names of all those who came together that day. And it was a beautiful opportunity for all of us to come together. When you ask the question, did it accomplish what I want? Well, I've been doing this work for 20 years of my life. So what was beautiful about it is that so many different people that I had never even worked with came together. Many of the issues that I have learned over the last, year and change are issues that I didn't even know much about. I'm learning. Everyone is learning together. Most of the women that sat at the table from then until now didn't really understand my community and the issues that we deal with as well, and the work that I had been doing. So the sharing of information and this new sort of collaboration that we are building was really, really powerful. If there's nothing else that the Women's March did, that is important. That's where sort of a very good feeling, an empowering feeling comes from, that we were able to put our personal issues to the side, to say, I can actually show up for you. So you can imagine the calls trying to talk to the environmental justice folks about why they would only get 12 minutes on the program. And they were like, well, we need the whole program, because this comes down to, whatever the environmental justice platform is. And then I'm calling people in the criminal justice field, and I'm like, you have 12 minutes on the program. And they're like, you're a traitor. You've been with us. Like, how dare you let these other people tell you what we need to be talking about? This is an opportunity to talk about our issues. And I had to say, listen, there's no way we will ever get people to hear us if we box them out, if we push them out. We have to be able to build this bridge and bring everyone to the table. And we were able to do that. And it was actually beautiful. So it accomplished that. But it did not necessarily accomplish the work that we have to do. The work that is to go forward, the work that we are all engaged in now, is the messy stuff. So it's like, it's real cool and cute to have like your pink pussy hat and you show up at the march and you got your signs and you're excited and you don't even know each other.
Yeah.
You don't know where people come from, you don't know their backgrounds, you don't know anything about them. And then all the layers start to get pulled back. And the question is, can you stick through the difficult times? You know, can you learn things that may make you feel uncomfortable, but understand that we're all at the table for the same reasons? Yeah.
This points exactly to my next question, which is around this idea of intersectionality and coalition building. So how do you, if we're taking an intersectional feminist lens, meaning like we're considering not just gender being one of these factors of privilege and oppression, but we're also considering race, ability, religion, ethnicity, all of these other things that play into how we treat privilege and oppression in society. Building coalitions across those differances is difficult.
Yeah.
Even just having personal relationships is difficult.
Yeah, check my Twitter feed today and know all about how difficult it is.
So I guess like if we commit to intersectionality and coalition building, tell us a little bit about just what is your view on how do you continue to build those coalitions, even when like showing up for one sometimes means you piss other people off, and then showing up for them means you piss them off, or you don't give the 12 minutes to the environmental justice folks. Like how do you weave through that while still trying to wrap folks together and keep them in conversation?
So leadership is extremely difficult, and particularly as a Black leader, we are always under attack. There is always going to be moments where people are going to find ways to tear you up. I mean, that's the rites of passage. If you study history, there is no Black leader at all that has ever, from Desmond Tutu to Nelson Mandela to, any Black leader that you think of, they have been under extreme pressure and scrutiny because what we bring is like it's like popping the pimple when we walk in the room. It's like the stuff comes out when we come in, because when I walk in a room, I'm bringing communities with me that people get really uncomfortable about. They don't necessarily want to have to deal with how they have left Ray Ray in my community behind. They really want to, and when we talk about intersectionality, you have to be able to be honest that, does intersectionality for you, is it a hashtag and a term that you just kind of use? Or are you willing to understand that being intersectional doesn't just mean you're the only person that matters? That there are other people who also have deep issues that need to be at the table. And particularly when you look at certain communities, we're broken. Like, we've been through a lot. And therefore, the way in which the world has to show up for us if we're going to be intersectional is understanding the complexities of all that we deal with and all that we go through. So this is a learning process that all of us are going to have to embark upon at the same time. Some people are going to get there sooner. Some people are not. Some people are going to be intolerant. Other people are going to be loving and try to understand. And all of us as people who are leaders in this hurt at times. And we bump up against one another. And it's a struggle, but it's worth it. It's worth it because what I know is that there is a force that is against us, that doesn't want us to do this. And so every opportunity that it gets to show its head, it's going to find ways to get in there and dig in and, and create as much tension and confusion as possible to keep us from doing this work. And what we have to do is find ways to sit at the table and say, that hurt me, I don't like this, I don't like that, but explain it to me. Help me understand it. And maybe I still don't understand it, but let me look at what you've been doing. Who are you? And what type of organizing have you been doing over your lifespan? And then see whether or not we can build from there. It's a difficult thing because I can tell you, when I first got involved in the Women's March, as I said, Black women were like, how dare you ask us to join a group of women that 53% of them voted against our children's lives. How dare you? And I had people get on phone calls with me and literally cry and curse me about the fact that I was even asking them to integrate, to walk into what they considered to be a toxic environment, because they understood that at the end of the day, our communities would hurt the most from whatever happens. Our children, our sons, little black boys, little black girls, little brown boys and girls will be impacted the most. And they said, how dare you ask me to do this? What is wrong with you? Why don't you just build with us? Why we can't have our own march? The white ladies need their own thing. Let them march with their grandmothers and aunties and do that. Why do you want to do that? And we said, no. This is the time when we all have an obligation to stand up together. And 5 million people, 5 million people across the world answered the call. Yeah.
It's incredible. Yeah. So, I guess on that note, like what do you talk a lot about us showing up for each other. And I think there's something really powerful about that. And if folks haven't watched Tamika's TED Talk, it's really powerful. I really recommend it. And so how do we show up for each other, and really specifically across these lines? Like, how do white women, and think about, like, as women, how do we show up for each other? So how does a white woman show up for a woman of color? How do high-paid workers show up for low-paid workers? What are your recommendations along
I would
those
say
lines?
one way is not trying to tell us how we need to organize and how our communities are shaped. Because if you don't live it and don't walk in it, you can't necessarily understand some of the complexities of how we get through and how we are able to organize in our own communities. I would say that's one. I would also say that, sometimes we just have to kind of be quiet. And that's for me too. I walk into spaces and I'm trying to organize with people, and it's not really about me. I'm privileged because I have community and resources and people who love me and support me. But when I go into schools with teenagers and I know that they're not as privileged and they don't even see, they look at me and they're like, yeah, okay, you ate this morning. Like, I didn't have anything to eat, or I don't know where my parents are, or I probably didn't eat this morning, so that's probably not true, but we're probably all on the same page about that, right? But, when they look at me, and I just kind of reduce myself, and try to step in a room, and it's hard as hell. It's hard as hell because you think you want to help, you're excited about it, and then you walk into a room full of broken people, and they're like, and you're like, what you mean? Like, I'm here, I showed up. But you have to understand that when you haven't been present, there is going to be resentment. There's going to be sort of a sense of people feeling like, why now are you here? And they've been taken advantage of before by people who have shown up to do research, to kind of check the lay of the land, to sprinkle a few dollars, but they're not people who, as my good partner would say, Carmen Perez would say, we no longer need allies, we need accomplices. We need people who are willing to go down with us or up with us. And most of the time we're gonna go up together. And so, I think that that's what it is. It's like trying to find ways to understand other communities, to understand their brokenness, and to understand that sometimes their attack is not even against you. It's really not about you. It's about the pieces that are all broken within them. And I don't know how we'll ever get there, but I feel like more and more people are beginning to sit back, like, in all the noise and clutter that's around us. Everybody is starting to say, wait, there's got to be more to this thing, and trying to feel it out. And so I personally am committed to turning every single moment that we feel like we took a turn down to an educational opportunity for us to be able to go back up again, so.
Thank you. What are your questions? We have like 10 minutes, and we have Tamika and I'm assuming folks have a lot of questions. So there's a couple folks here in the aisles who are circulating with microphones. If you have a question, raise your hand, and someone with a microphone will come give you the microphone. And don't be shy, because it's like 10 minutes. This is the moment.
Testing.
Maybe here on the, okay, over the, I'm not sure who's going first, actually. Okay, on the left, or on your right.
My question is for, I wonder if you can talk at all about how you learned how to be a leader constantly under attack. I assume you weren't always able to do that. Maybe you were, but can you talk at all about how you learned how to do that?
No, I was not always able to, and let me not confuse people or make you think that I'm like steel, because it still hurts. You know, I've had a really, really tough week, and it doesn't feel good. It's not like you're just walking around like, oh, well, hey, you know, no, it's tough. Every leader that I know will tell you that they've had some tough moments alone. And so we learn every day. The thing for me is that I have an 18-year-old son, and his father was shot and killed when my son was just 2 years old. I don't really have a choice. So some people can decide that they kind of want to pop in and out, and and when it gets to be too hot in the kitchen, they're like, I'm going to the living room. I have to stay in the kitchen. I have to help fight the fire, because my son's life literally depends on what I do. If I am not active, and if other people are not working towards liberation and in the struggle, because we sort of have this idea that movement, again, I was talking about the hats, the pink hats, and some of the signs and the beauty of the movement. We sort of get caught up in that, and it becomes like the glamour of the movement. It's like a club. It's like we're hanging out. But really what it is a struggle. All movements are struggles. And if people weren't engaged in struggle, maybe it wouldn't stop the next police officer from deciding to take out his gun and just choose my son as the person he's so afraid of and shoot him right there, wherever. Maybe it won't get guns off of our street where my son doesn't have to worry about someone who looks like him killing him. Maybe, it won't, this struggle that we're in can stop us from being hungry, stop children from not being able to eat. And if that is the case, I don't have a choice, because if I see it from a personal prism, that it matters to me personally, then I have no choice but to be engaged and to fight like hell. So it's not about learning how to take it and how to deal with the attacks. That just goes along with the territory. You just have no choice but to take it, because the alternative is to do nothing. And to do nothing is not okay.
Hi. First of all, I think it's amazing that we have a Black woman ending as our keynote speaker at our conference. I wish I could see more Black and brown women in the audience, and I hope we can do better at that next time at the next conference. So I think it's amazing that you're our honored keynote. I think it's also amazing that you talked about Black Twitter at an MIT conference. I have some of my best friends back home are Black women and men, and so I know very well about Black Twitter, and trust me, you don't want to get dragged on Black Twitter.
Don't want to get dragged. Don't want to get dragged.
So anyway, my question is, I personally have a lot of Black women and male friends, and also part of my work is working closely with Black and brown communities to bring more STEM education programs to underserved communities. So I feel like, and it's really weird because I'm an Asian woman, so when I go into these communities, I clearly don't belong there. And it's really weird at first. People perceive me as kind of a stranger, and they are suspicious, like, oh, you're just here to, you're here today, but you're gonna be gone, next year when you run out of funding for this, special interest project you have.
Right.
So what I wanted to ask was, do you have any other suggestions for people who wanna help out and wanna understand more the perspectives that these communities have while still being respectful and still contributing to your cause? But like you said, not, stopping and listening and being respectful, but is there anything more we can do beyond that that would be acceptable as well?
I would say, I tell everyone everywhere, and it's really short, keep showing up. That's something that is like really simple, or to say, but it's hard sometimes when you are met with resistance, but you have to keep showing up. You have to keep trying. And sometimes you have to keep looking for that space where you fit. Every room is not for you. There are rooms where Black folks need to organize by themselves so they can say whatever they want to say and cry if they want to cry and feel how they want to feel. And they don't want anyone else that is outside of their particular group to be present. And that's okay. But there will be other groups that do need your resources and your time and your energy. The issue, what I find in all the organizing spaces that I'm in, and trust me, I'm in way too many of them, is that people feel authenticity. They know when you come in and you're like privileged and you want to tell them about, whatever, too many things, too much, you know too much, you're like the scientist in the room, if you will.
There's a lot here.
Yeah. That's too much sometimes. Sometimes people just want you to come with your authentic story, and sometimes saying, I haven't shown up for you, and I know that, and I apologize, and I'm trying to figure out how to do this now. Can you help me walk through this process? Will be an authentic start. And as soon as you hear or feel something that's uncomfortable, to automatically go off is not the answer. Because people sometimes will test you to see whether or not you can actually go through something difficult with them and still stay around. So I think that authenticity is so, so important, and it's in you. However you show up with your family is how you have to also show up with people you're trying to build community with. Because you have to remember that trust is such a big part of this. It's such a big part. If I don't feel like I can trust you, I don't want to be in community with you, because we've been abused and bruised and every other kind of oozed that you can think of for too long. So we feel automatically in defense, like what's going to happen with you being around. And you have to recognize that, it's not about you personally. But there is history, and when you understand history, then you can understand why people are responding to you in the way in which they are. So I would just say, keep showing up and look for a space that is for you. Every space may not be for you.
Hi, everyone. So I think it's a really interesting conversation because I think everybody in this room has a struggle, right? I personally right now am dealing with bullying with my 3-year-old. Mm-hmm. Well, sorry, 3rd grader. I'm a little nervous. And, I work for a company that is all about the human behind the code, and we really celebrate individuality, people from all over the world. And I struggle to deal with my 3rd grade daughter's classroom.
Yeah.
When you go into knowing that it's going to be a very uncomfortable situation, but you come from such a human place and the other person doesn't understand that, how do you make that connection? Mm-hmm. How do you break through? And I think that could be something that could be in a classroom with a professor or with a male boss or, several different things. Like, you're going to go into something knowing that's uncomfortable, trying to be empathetic, trying to be inclusive and empathetic. But if you get hit with a no, obviously I don't take no for an answer a lot, but so. How do you kind of persevere and still remain impactful in that conversation?
I don't have an answer for all those things, because if I did, I would get a Nobel Peace Prize for the dopest ever. But I think I would say the 3rd grader is very different from the professor. So to try to give the same answer is impossible, but let's just go with the 3rd grader. No kid is a bully just because. There's something that's going on. And I feel like too many of us are so frustrated and moving so quick and everything is just happening that we're not necessarily paying attention to the children the way in which we should. What we did, and like I grew up in the hood, in the housing projects, and whenever there was a problem, the kids had to stay together all the time. Like if there was a fight, you were fighting every day until you worked it out, because the parents forced us to be together, to learn one another, because usually it comes from this fear of the unknown. It comes from this sort of person feeling like they need to be, they're covering something. So they need other people to be inferior in these moments. And I don't know if you have relationships with the parents, but I would just say that trying to bring those children together in space where you can monitor what's happening is really important. The reason why I'm giving this very tactical advice is because I work with a lot of young people that deal with bullying, like as that's their thing, and they have found that relationship is the best way to deal with it. And it's like extra work, right? Nobody has time for, but it's like relationship has been the best way to figure out how to deal with bullying. Getting those who are the bullies, kinda, because I don't like to put titles on people except Donald Trump. He's like the only person that you would ever hear me put a title. It's like the only person I put titles on. And when he's no longer president, I won't put a title on him, but as long as he's like the boss, title. So, but relationship seems to be the thing that these young people that I work with have been doing that's working. It's something about making, especially at that age, because what we find is usually the third grader who's being bullied becomes the bully later in order to deal with what they've been through. And that relationship piece is super important. So I would say tactically, trying to figure out how to get everybody together and just letting them know, like, we're just gonna love this out of you, you know? Just gonna love it out of you. And you gotta get the parents on the same page, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. So I will say a little prayer for you, because I was bullied and I was a bully, like when I was little. And it literally came from it happening to me, because I've always been really small. And when I was very little, people used to bully me. And so when I got to be a little bit older, probably in like the 6th grade, I just got with the crowd that was bullying other people, and I was like hiding in the crowd, you know? So I would just say, but then eventually, I just got a little bit of courage on my own, and that was a whole different era. Like, you know, once I figured out how to stand up for myself. So relationship works, I think. Thanks.
So I'm so sorry, but we are at 5:30, and I'm gonna take the moderator privilege to ask one final question. I'm sorry for the folks that didn't get to ask their questions. But Tamika, tell us, what gives you hope right now?
Right now, hope. It's so funny. Hope. Hope is that people will appreciate the work that I've done for a very, very long time, and that people will see me for who I am, rather than trying to place on me other people and other people's words and things and issues, because I think I've been committed for a very, very long time to a certain type of work that folks, I hope, will appreciate. So that's my personal hope, and I believe that that is so. I claim that. I think that my hope for the broader movement, I'll tell you guys a quick story. So a week ago, I was, I guess about a week and some days ago, I was arrested in Washington, D.C. for Black immigration.
I did see those pictures.
Yeah, and let me tell you, some people think like, I hear people like, that's so cool. And I'm like, yeah, nah, not so cool. Because when they put the handcuffs on you and stick you in the back of the paddy wagon, it doesn't feel cool at all. But you know, I was arrested for Black immigration, and when I was leaving, they took us, you know, to a processing place, and when we were getting out of the van, I could see all of these ladies like sitting inside of this processing center. And so they took me in, and as I was walking through the doors with the handcuffs on my hand, all like 40 or 50 white ladies just started clapping. And they had handcuffs on, they put the handcuffs on the front. And so they were like clapping for me. And I was like, who all these white women? So when I sat down and started talking to them, they said, oh, we're nuns. And they had been arrested for the same cause, for immigration overall. And so what makes me hopeful is I've been arrested a few times, all civil disobedience, let's be clear, it's all illegal, legal, however that works, right? I mean, y'all know what I'm saying. But anyway, and I've never seen that. Every time, every issue, everything that I've been engaged in, other folks really showing up when the cause really deeply impacts people of color has been light, has not been there. And to see those women sitting in that processing center, welcoming me, they were arrested before I got there. I was so proud. And I just knew that all the pain, all the hell we go through, it was worth it in that moment. Because that's the hopeful moment, that other people will see that their struggle and our struggle is connected and that they will actually show up for us.
Beautiful. Thank you. So, on behalf of all of us, thank you so much.
That was really beautiful.
Thanks for joining us. And for more information on how to connect with the MIT Alumni Association, please visit our website.